Hello colleagues, I'm here with this Alfa Romeo Giulietta QV, and I want to be exploring some of the physics and the science behind some of your driving. I may make this into a 3-part series, but this first video is going to be the longest of the 3 because it's going to go through most of the principles that we're talking about. Only a few of them are going to require a different vehicle and a different episode. The first, most important details about this car is, let's talk about its drivetrain. That's what you use to describe the layout of the engine, the transmission, the drive shaft, differential, a transfer case if you have it, and which wheels are powered and which wheels do the steering. Generally, the basic chassis of this car. It's a transverse front-wheel drive turbo 4-cylinder, which means that it has 4 cylinders with forced induction in the form of a turbo, and the front wheels are the ones that are moving us forward as well as turning, just like any normal car. Let's go through some of the things that this simulator allows us to change about this car. The first thing is tires. This is going to be the easiest thing to change on your real-life car, and it does have some effect. One thing that we can do is we can really decrease the pressure on these tires, and that's going to put a lot less pressure on the outside. They're going to be a lot more grabby. They're going to stick to that road a lot better, which is a good thing until you realize that's also going to increase the wear and decrease the lifespan of your tire. So if you're in the snow or something, you might think about airing down your tires if you don't have a good substitute. It's going to give you a bigger contact patch. That tire's being lowered down onto the road. It doesn't have as much air that's pushing it up. And because it's cold, you can still get away with that and the tire won't have that much more wear. Just a trick that you can think about. Now, if we do the opposite, if we pump both of these tires up to 45 psi, that's going to do, again, the opposite. It's going to lift that tire up off of the road because there's more air in between that rim and that tire. And it's also going to decrease your contact patch, which can be useful because that means your tire is going through less wear, it's going to have less heat, it might even extend the lifespan of your tire. But it's going to be a lot more sensitive. It's going to be easier to change direction. It's going to a lot more twitchy, which some rally cars might do this because their courses are narrow and tight and they need to change direction quickly. They might have more pressure in them than, say, a GT3 car that needs to really stick to the road and has a lot of room to move around. Let's reset it back to the default just for this demonstration. Again, your factory is going to have recommended tire pressures. It's going to vary on a few different cars, but see your instruction manual and that should give you what pressure your tires should normally be at. Fuel, again, this is pretty obvious. It's going to add or decrease weight to your car. Your car can weigh more or weigh less depending on how much fuel there is. It only really affects performance driving. A beginner might not really notice if you change the fuel in the car and ask them to go drive, but a professional can definitely tell you the difference. If you get under about 10 liters or so in a race car, it feels really different than if you just got a full tank. So let's just put it at 3/4 and see how that does. Alignment is a lot more smaller in terms of detail. It's a lot less noticeable. It's hard to explain without a proper diagram. I might pause the video here and draw up a diagram on the whiteboard. If not, I would recommend also looking up a video that explains camber and toe more in depth. But essentially, it's a part of what is called alignment on your car, which changes how the wheel sits on the ground in a normal state. Camber can be useful because it gives you more grip in the corners, but everything is a sacrifice in tuning. You can trade grip on the straights for grip on the corners, but you can't really just make your car faster. You can only make it faster in certain scenarios. But it's a very good science to know about just when you're driving. Another option we have is to decrease our brake power. Now this may sound bad because your car is less able to stop, but actually it can be useful because a huge part of driving is trusting your car. If I have it all the way up here at 100, and I like to drive without assists, I turn off all traction control, all ABS, so I can really learn how to control my fingers, how to control the inputs to the car and how it affects. The computer isn't just going to save me or bail me out of something. But that means that if I have this all the way at 100%, I need to be really careful with that brake pedal so I don't lock up these wheels when I'm going into a turn. Now, I might want to decrease this down to 95 or so, just so I can be a little bit less, just so that brake pedal is a little easier for me to use, so I can trust it more. I can still lock up the wheels with this. If I just go full on the brake pedal, it's still going to lock up the wheels, but it's a little bit less sensitive. I have a little bit more room for error, which in real life can be useful. So we'll put this down to 95 just to keep us safe. Again, these things you kind of need a dedicated mechanic to really change in real life. These things I think you even need custom suspension components. You can't do it with the factory ones. But it's good to think about the science of tuning your car and how it affects the way it behaves. Again, with gears, this one doesn't even let us change it, but you'd need the custom gearbox to change your gears around. I don't even know how to do it, but it does help sometimes. Alright, let's get on the road and I can show you a few basic scenarios that you might run into if you are careless. So I'm just going to drive around this turn, and I'll stop right here next to the grid, and I can explain to you some of the things that you're seeing on the screen right now, because it might look a little bit like Iron Man. So as I said before, this car is a front-wheel drive 4-cylinder turbo car, which is a really common platform nowadays. It's more common than you'd think. A lot of cars elect to use a turbo or forced induction instead of using displacement because it requires a smaller engine, smaller space, and it's a lot more efficient on fuel. This is actually probably what you're driving is a front-wheel drive 4-cylinder, and it probably does have a turbo because again, manufacturers, they like to sell this extra power that the car supposedly has, and to give it that, they use a turbo. So, and I can prove it to you if I hold down the handbrake and I give it some revs, and I'm going to shift up and you're going to see what a front-wheel drive Burnout looks like. See all that power? It goes straight to the front wheels. Those rear wheels, they aren't really doing anything. They're just keeping the back end up. Of course, in real life, that's really unhealthy for your car. In real life, we probably have like pretty big flat spots on those rear tires, which when you're going down the highway are going to get louder and louder the bigger they are. Another trick you can use to gauge the health of your tires and the health of your, like, the damage your driving habits might be doing is you might hear a really loud clunking sound. That could be a flat spot on one of your tires. Anyways, let's talk about some of the HUD you're seeing. On the right of the screen, you're going to see this 3/4 circle. You see this white bar filling up and a little orange bar inside of it. The white bar is my RPMs, and the orange bar is going to be my boost. We can see this a little bit better on the inside of the car. If you look down at the bottom in the middle of the screen, you're going to see this little red display. Right now it's set to show you the bar, which, if you're into science, you know that's a measurement for air pressure. Again, I would recommend looking up videos on how a turbo works just so you can understand a little bit more about your car. But essentially what it does is it uses air going out of the engine, exhaust fumes, to compress air that's going into the engine. Your engine makes more power if you can fit more air and more fuel into that combustion chamber when the piston goes up. So what the turbo does is it crushes the air together and compresses it, and then it sends it into the engine. And the more bar we have, that's the more the air is being compressed. And you can also hear this. If I just turn the car around for a second and drive down the straight, if you really pay attention, you can hear a little whine in the distance. That's an easy way to tell if a car has a turbo. But a lot of turbos on factory cars, they're not going to be tuned to have a lot of bar, maybe only 5 or 6 bar, and you won't really hear that. They're going to be really small turbos. But this car has a pretty decent sized turbo, so if you listen, you can hear it. Again, it's kind of hard to hear with the engine, it's kind of overpowered by the engine, but a trained ear can listen to it, and you're going to notice it gets louder when that scale fills up. So I'll go back there and I'll do that same thing again. Really listen when that biggest bar on the far right there is full, right above the gear number on the red display. That's what it sounds like when air is crushed together and put into your engine. Anyways, let's move on to the rest of our HUD. Right above that 3/4 circle I showed you, you're going to see these 4 bars. The green bar, that's my throttle input, so I'm at half throttle right now, about half. Now full throttle, and now I'm completely off the pedals. The blue bar is the clutch. I don't have a clutch mapped, so the game is just automatically applying that clutch when I'm off the power, I guess. I'm not sure. And then this red bar, that's brakes. So right now I'm full on the brakes, I'm off the brakes, I'm about half on the brakes, now about 3/4 on the brakes, and I'm full on the brakes again. That's my braking bar. And then that's it. And then on the far left there, you're going to see our tires. That's really important. It's going to tell us how our tires are behaving, where the stress on our tires is going to be, and how that's affecting our driving. So right now they're really cold. We haven't been putting that much stress on the car. It's been just sitting here. They're going cold. They have the 36 and 35 psi that we put into them originally, and they're down to 32 degrees. You can also see smaller numbers. That's going to be the outer, middle, and inside of the tires. And you can also see a little green bar next to the tires, and that is going to show you the degradation of the tires. So on a race car, when it's going, when it's endurance racing, that bar is slowly going to dip down because those tires are being put through a lot of stress, a lot of pressure, and they just aren't. They're racing tires. They aren't going to last forever. In real life, if you're driving calm and steady, your tires can last a really long time. A few 10,000 miles, 20,000 miles, 30,000 miles even. Your tires can go the distance. But we're going to be going hard on the car today. You might see that green bar dip down a little bit. That's also going to give you an idea of where the most wear on the tires is. Anyways, let's talk some more about driving. So what I want to show you today is what happens when a car loses control, when it doesn't obey your instructions, and how you can keep your car under control so it does obey your instructions. So right now we've got a really sharp turn ahead of us, and I'm going to show you what happens when you're careless with the steering. I'm just going to go in, I'm not going to control my speed, not going to control my steering, I'm just going to go full lock to the right, and you're going to see the car is going to understeer. So let's do that. Get some speed up. There you go, you see? I wasn't thinking about what I was doing, and the front tires, I overloaded them. They couldn't obey my instructions. They couldn't hold on. So we did what they call understeer, which is where the car is not steering enough. You're trying to go all the way to the right, and the car can't do that, so it keeps going straight, or kind of to the right. So I wasn't thinking about what I was doing, and if this was real life, I might have gone into a tree or a barrier or a road or something. And that was because I overloaded those front tires. So let's go back and let's do that again, and this time I'm going to think about my steering. I'm going to slow down more, and I'm not going to go full lock. I'm going to consider the car. I'm going to be gentle on the car, and I'm not going to overload these tires. There you go. See, I just steered a little bit. I kept my speed under control, and we made it through that turn. We made it through that turn relatively easily. It wasn't really hard. We just turned in a little bit and then lifted off. We thought about it. We could feel how the car was reacting, and we could act accordingly. So now let's talk about what happens when you're careless with the throttle. A lot of people, they can know how to steer. They're alright at steering. That's not a huge issue for most people. But a lot of people, they don't really understand how your throttle impacts your car. So essentially your tires, they can only do so much. They can only do so much accelerating, steering, braking. All of that is put onto one tire. And if you overload that tire's maximum capacity of input, then it won't be able to do what you're asking it to, and that could be really dangerous. So I'm going to go around this turn, and I'm just going to lay on the throttle. I'm going to be really careless about it, and you're going to see the car is going to understeer, not because I'm steering too hard, but because I'm accelerating too hard. And the tire, even though there's not much steering input going on, there's a lot of throttle input, and it's not going to be able to hold onto the road. There you go, and that actually ended up in a crash. I think if we look, yeah, I've damaged this poor Alpha. Damn. So what happened there, you guys saw, I wasn't even steering that much. It was just that I was careless with the throttle, and that overloaded the tires. So now I'm gonna do the same thing again, but I'm gonna be proportionate with the throttle. I'll actually come off the pedals altogether, so that way the tire can fully dedicate itself to steering around this turn, and I'll only add a little bit of throttle just to keep the car going. There we go, be gentle with the throttle, and we're straight, so now I can get back on it again. There we go. So those are the two ways that your car is going to disobey you when going around a turn, is if you overload the throttle, overload the braking. Actually, I can show you that right now, yeah. If you overload the throttle, overload the steering, or if we overload the braking, which again is going to be harder because we decreased our brake power, but I think we still can. So again, that's our ABS not functioning, and we couldn't even turn. We aren't even slightly turned. We're still basically parallel to that straight that we were just on. So those are the ways that your car can disobey you, and if you're really clear and gentle with everything when going around a turn, you won't have these problems. Let's go back to the pit so we can get that front end fixed. And we'll do some more laps around these track. We'll go further down this track so that we can see more conditions and more things that might influence your car on the road. Another thing to listen to is that tire screeching sound. It's probably obvious, but that can tell you that one of these tires is losing grip. And if you have a really keen ear, you might even be able to tell which one. Because tires don't lose grip all at once. There's one of them and then two of them, and yeah. So right here we have one of the most famous corners in all of motorsport. It's called Rouge, and it has claimed many careers for two simple reasons. Firstly, it is a really sharp uphill from a decent grade downhill, and what happens here where my car is it actually gains grip. Because your car wants to keep going downhill, that mass doesn't want to move around, and then it hits this uphill, all of that mass is going to push this car down into the pavement, and it's going to get more grip through this corner temporarily. So now we're going on the uphill, we've got a gentle right, and then the road flattens out again. And of course, if you're driving normally like I was, you won't really have a problem. But this corner has claimed a lot of racing careers because when your car is going up that hill, all of that mass wants to keep going up that hill. All that mass wants to keep going uphill, it doesn't want to flatten out. So on this crest of this corner, the opposite happens. Your car is actually going to lose grip. And a lot of, like in the Porsche Cup series, I think in 2018, there were not one but two cars that had to quit the race because they lost grip at this corner. Because it's uphill, they lost the back end of the car and they crashed into this barrier right here. These barriers have claimed a lot of racing careers, a lot of races for a lot of drivers, just because you lose all your grip on that corner because of the road change, the grade change. So now we get to our first big straight of Eau Rouge. You can go full on down through this corner, pretty alright. You don't really need to slow down here. Now we've got a really sharp corner. And this corner, it's not particularly hard, it's not really off camber, it's not dealing with slopes. The only thing is just going from this really long straight, really fast straight, into this really sharp corner. You really have to pay attention when you have this big a change in speed. Another principle I can talk about is weight shifting. It might sound kind of scary to think that your car is moving around without you, but actually it can be really useful and a really good thing to know for if you're performance driving or even if you're just normal driving. Just understanding how your car behaves is really important. So what you're going to see when I accelerate here is you're going to see that back end dip down and this front end is going to lift up. That means all that weight is on the rear of the car because all that mass is just getting going and it doesn't want to move. It wants to stay back. It doesn't want to move. So here we go. And then I shift gears. You can see that little movement there. That's because I'm not accelerating and then accelerating again. Now I'm going to brake really hard. You can see that front of the car, it dips down, all the weight lifts off of that rear and it all instantly goes to the front. It's kind of like a liquid. It's like, imagine if there was a bunch of water slushing around your car. That's basically what the weight is doing. So it might sound scary to have this liquid mass flushing around your car, but actually can be really useful in performance driving. So this corner is really sharp, and I'm going to be going really fast, which means if I brake, I can move a whole lot of weight off of the rear wheels and onto the front wheels, which makes the car a lot more agile, and it can help me get around this sharp turn. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to get up to speed, and you're going to see me use my weight to move myself around this turn faster. Alright, and then brake and turn. You can see I can really turn into the corner there. Really turn into the corner, and let's do it again. Let's do it again. That really helped me turn there. And there we go. I was able to get around those corners because I knew about how to shift my weight around and still keep the car under control. This is another really unique corner in motorsport. It's kind of overshadowed by Rouge, but it still introduces an important principle. This is one of the most famous off-camber turns of motorsports, and that means that while you're trying to stick to this apex, stick to this racing line, your car is trying to drift on the outside because it's actually lower out here than it is on the inside in here. So while you're going through this, your car is going to want to drift off of that slope because it kind of wants to go downhill always. It's kind of like water. Anyways, let's go back to the top and let's try again at navigating this turn at speed. Again, that off camber is pushing me outside, so I'm going to slow down, decrease my radius so I can get back on the road. Another interesting thing about turns is some of them are kind of hard for people to drive around just because of the way they are perceived. A lot of turns in motorsport, they don't look hard on a map or from a bird's eye, but when you're down there in a car, they can be very hard to navigate. This turn is another turn. This turn is not only off camber, but it's a long turn, which means it's difficult to judge where your car is supposed to be. A lot of drivers might cut in, so they'll try and take the racing line, they'll cut in, and then they think the turn is over, so they'll start moving out, but they'll move out too early and they'll overshoot right here. Just because this is a longer turn than they expected, and they weren't expecting it to last all the way around here. And they're trying to get the fastest line, they're trying to keep their car balanced, and they just weren't paying attention. They didn't know this circuit. So now that we know that that's a longer turn than usual, let's take a line that'll more effectively round out this turn and make it easier for our car and our driver. Stay out here. Hit the apex about here. Stay in the apex until we see that apron, and then we'll shoot for the apron. Again, I don't think that's a perfect line. There are a lot of little tiny discrepancies that you can see, but generally that's going to be a lot faster and a lot easier on you and your car. So let's finish this lap of the circuit. We can talk about some more turns and some more basic principles that are doing their work on this car. Another important detail is that your tires, they don't like to multitask. A lot of people, they'll be really messy with the pedals. They won't think about what they're doing. They'll try and brake and stop and brake and stop all in the same turn. And that really slows them down, and that makes the car really unstable. So here, I'm going to be a real beginner right here. You can see that was a really janky lap, that wasn't smooth, it wasn't fast, and our tires, they're really hot now because a lot of pressure went through them. So on this turn, I'm not going to be a beginner. I'm going to think about what I'm doing, and I'm going to do it a good way, a good strategy. So what you want to do, you want to brake all at once right before the entrance of this turn, and then you want to turn all at once through the turn, turning, and then you accelerate after the turn. You don't want to brake and steer and brake and steer and accelerate and steer. You want to do it all in 3 distinct segments so that you can really maximize that capability of your tires. So I'm going to show you a little bit more of that with the rest of this lap. We don't have much left, we just have this long straight and one corner where you need to lift off for. What I just did there is another danger that you can run into at high speeds. It's called lift-off oversteer. Essentially, it relies on a principle we talked about earlier, where when you brake or decelerate, all that weight lifts off of your rear wheels and goes to the front. The thing is, if there's nothing for that weight to do at the front, it's going to start moving around, and that rear is going to start moving around, and you could lose it on a totally straight road or on a lift-off curve like that. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to try and do some lift-off oversteer so you can see it better. You're going to see my steering is going to be gentle. I'm not going to be on the throttle. I'm also not going to be on the brakes. The car is just going to move around because all that weight is at the front and it's active. It's active and it wants to go somewhere. See, I completely lost control there. Even though my steering inputs were gentle, all that weight moved to the front and it was active, and that little steering input got multiplied by all of that weight that just moved up there, and it spun my car around. One thing that we can do to negotiate this out better is we can just apply a little bit of brake. We can just lift off and keep the car perfectly straight, apply a little bit of brake, and then we can do our steering. So let's try that on this corner up here. Not this one, this is a gentle one. This next one is actually a real corner. So we're going to lift off, brake a little bit. That weight is active and it works in slowing our car down instead of spinning it around. And we got through that corner just fine because we were aware of that and we did something to counter that. So we're going to brake in a straight line, steer in a straight line, and then just accelerate a little bit to get through the corner. There we go. So again, there's a bunch of science behind this, and you can look it up if you're so inclined. But those are just a few of the basic principles that it's good to understand and function on every car, every day, no matter the weather. It's just physics, it's science, and it's a fact of nature. So now we're going to finish this off by doing a burnout in a front-wheel drive car. How you do this, you're going to hold down the handbrake, that's going to lock those rear wheels there. You're going to go neutral so you can build up revs easier. And then when you want to do the burnout, you just shift up into first, keep that throttle down, and there you go. You're just as bad as every annoying Honda Civic owner. it's a fun hobby, you might consider it. Thanks for watching.